Hi, it's Jody Medell, Doctor of Physical Therapy and Transformational Coach, back for more with video number 4 on trauma and healing. Again, with our goal being the focus of coming home to you. And that means that we want to be able to open up our heart space and feel safe and comfortable so that we can reside there with lots of love, light, where we can be fully, authentically, and beautifully who we are. So coming home to you. In last week's video, I shared a bit of my story with you, and the goal of that was to relate with to you with why I'm so passionate about trauma and healing, why it's really important for me to get the word out. Again, I'm not a counselor or a psychotherapist. I am a coach, and through coaching, I can truly support you on your journey. And also as a physical therapist when it comes to trauma that resides in the physical body, working on that. But I was just hoping that if you heard my story, you would understand why it really touches my heart and why I am truly passionate about this journey, helping to educate you and hopefully share with you as I learn more, share with you what I've learned so that together we can grow and we can continue to be on this journey towards healing. So, all right, let's move on. Today, I really want to focus on one aspect of healing within this whole trauma healing cycle. And before we begin on that, I want to bring up something that Anna Runkle, she is the founder of Crappy Childhood Fairy. She is an amazing source of information on childhood or complex PTSD. She talked about trauma. And one of the things she said that really hit home, and something I feel I really need to share with you, is that trauma can't be undone. We can't heal trauma itself. What we can do is heal the effects of trauma. So if we look at trauma, trauma happened in the past. Trauma was an event or a series of events that happened to us. We can't go back, turn back the hands of time and change that. But that trauma did impact us. It had an effect on us. And what we can do in present time, right here, right now, change the effect that that trauma has had and continues to have on us, so that we can take that old story, create a new narrative with a new outcome. But we can only do that in the present tense or the present moment. We can't go back to the past and make any changes, nor can we jump ahead in the future because it's just not here yet. But if we're here now, focused on our healing in this moment, we can change the projection. We can change how we reside in our bodies. We can change how we feel in our hearts. So I want you to keep that in mind, because if you have this notion of healing the trauma, changing the actual trauma, it just isn't possible. So if you can give that up and put your energy into healing the effects of that trauma, then you get more bang for your buck, all right? One of the core pieces of the effects of trauma on our system is brain dysregulation. Basically what happens is that when we undergo trauma, and it can be a one done wham bam, or it can be a series of traumas that are complex over a period of time, it changes the way our brain functions. Our brain basically gets into a reactive mode of fight or flight. So if anything happens in this outside world, we are overreactive to it. We respond with a heightened anxiety or a heightened sensitivity to what happens around us. And then that leads to a whole nother sequela of events because our brain is in this hyper-chaotic mode. If we didn't experience trauma, our brain would take in what happens and respond accordingly. So we'd have a nice balance in our brain between our sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight or flight, and if something truly was going to hurt us, we'd kick into that mode. And if we didn't have trauma, our brain would also experience the parasympathetic nervous system, which is more of a relaxed responding mode. But with trauma, we tend to not be able to really tap into that parasympathetic nervous system response, especially when we're out and about in the environment. We tend to be in that heightened awareness, hyper mode of fight or flight. And so I just want you to know that that really is the core of what dysfunction happens with trauma. But I'm not going to really focus on that today. I'm going to focus on one of the effects of what that brain dysregulation causes. And so the focus of today is on the inner critic. The inner critic is basically our ego identity on steroids. And the ego identity, if you remember back a couple videos ago, I spoke about my swirls. My old swirls were kind of like this, coming together in the middle. And it was more of my expression of inside out versus outside in. Well, my new swirls are from top down and bottom up, coming together in the middle. All right, so they integrate in the middle. So it's about the body, mind, and spirit coming together, integrating in the middle to lead to full healing. So the ego identity is our mind. The ego identity is who we call ourselves, how we relate in the world, what we call, I just said it, what we call ourselves. I am mother, I am an employee, I am an owner of a business, I am a physical therapist. So we have this identity with our physicality. We have an identity with the things that we do. And as the day changes, as our emotions about that changes, then our attachment to that identity changes as well. Well, the inner critic is the ego identity on steroids. So if you take that identification and you just explode it, heighten it, which is part of that brain dysregulation, which is why I mentioned it a couple minutes ago, you get an over-exaggerated ego identity. And that is caused, this whole inner critic is created out of our need to prove to our parents that we are worthwhile. We're trying to prove to them that we don't need to be abused, that we don't need to be neglected, that we're good enough, that if we show up and we are here, then they can take care of us. And so that inner critic comes in to let us know what we're doing right and what we're doing wrong so that we can be perfect. Because man, if we're perfect, then there's no reason for us not to be in a safe, loving, caring environment. That just makes sense. But the problem with that is that the brain, or the mind, is wrong. We can't change the behavior of others. We can show up as perfectly as we want to. That's not going to change the environment we're in. That's not going to change how we're cared for. That's not going to give us the love and support that we need, because the people who are there to give it can't do it. And no matter how good we are, that just isn't going to happen. So our inner critic gets really upset. It gets very angry. And the angrier it gets, it forces us into a place of emotional explosion, which is also part of that brain dysregulation that I talked about earlier. So it's just super important that you know that this inner critic is not you. All right? It's our reaction. It is how you are embodying this upsetness, if that's a word, of not having your needs met. And the inner critic comes in and it's so judgmental that it leads to, one, the perfectionism of, if I'm perfect, then I'll be able to change everyone so that I'm taken care of. But it also leads to, when it doesn't get what it wants, blame and shame and guilt, self-anger, or anger directed at self, self-sabotage. because we can never win. We will never win. Our inner critic always wins. And if we identify with that, we're really lost and we really struggle, because that inner critic is so judgmental. Not only is it judgmental of you, it's judgmental of the world around you, because nothing will ever be good enough for it. But remember, this is a creation of your mind. It is not who you are. If we look at who you are in your essence, you are spirit. So when we talk about mind, body, and spirit, the mind is that ego identity turning into ego identity on steroids, inner critic, holy cow, with trauma. And then we have the spirit, which is our constant. It's where we are just being. It's who we truly are, our authentic self. And if we can find that place of spirit where things don't change, it's not up, down, all around. The inner critic, you'll know it's the inner critic because one, it's negative. And even if it is positive, it's positive on a level that is self-serving, not on a level that's really loving and supportive of you. Your spirit self is just love. It's the connection to everything. It's the oneness. And so it's really important that you discern between the inner critic and the steady state spirit of who you truly are. Okay, why is it important to know the difference between your inner critic and your spirit, or your ego identity, the mind, and spirit? It's important to know because once you get that differentiation, healing begins. Knowing that you are not the inner critic, knowing that that's not who you are, and then knowing that your heart space, the spirit inside of you, is truly who you are, then you can reach that steady state. I hope that makes sense. My homework for you based on that is, 1, try to be in present tense. Try to be here and now. I want you to check in throughout the day and get a journal and write these things down. Check in and find out how much of the time do you spend in the past, how much time do you spend in present tense, and how much time do you spend in the future. What we'd like to do is close up that gap so that we're spending very little time in the past, we can't change it, very little time in the future, it hasn't happened yet, and the majority of our time is right here, right now, where we can make changes, where we can be here, right? Because that is where we are, right? So number 1, get a journal, pay attention to how much time you're spending in the past, in the present, and in the future. The second part of this homework is to be mindful and pay attention to your inner critic. See if you can capture throughout the day when your inner critic has the wheel and is driving you, versus you staying at a steady state and not reacting to the drama outside of you. Basically, if you look at it, the inner critic is the movie that's playing out in front of you. It's the chaos. You can see it happening. Your soul, your spirit, is the observer behind it. It's hanging out and watching the drama unfold. You can jump into the drama and become the drama, or you can stay back here as the observer and watch it go down, and then it doesn't change your emotions and the state that you're in. Mooji, M-O-O-J-I, is a spiritual teacher, and he has some great videos on really understanding how you can really see, experience, feel the difference between the ego identity, or with trauma, that inner critic, versus the spirit being the observer and stepping back. If you go to Mooji, MOOJI.org, O-R-G, just select any video that looks appealing to you. And he really, in each of the videos, lays the framework of what it means to be the observer versus jumping into the drama and becoming that drama. And that then really sets up the stage for you understanding the difference between when you're residing in place of spirit versus residing within the inner critic and becoming that inner critic. So start with those two pieces of homework. It's going to be a great exploration for you to really create that understanding of how much time you allow that inner critic to take the wheel and you become that versus how much time you spend as the observer. Once you have that down, then we'll use that as a foundation for moving forward into the next healing sequence. The reason why I'm bringing this up first is because this was super huge for me when I discovered about the ego identity, and that with trauma, it becomes ego identity on steroids. I thought that because I was in the healing world, working as a physical therapist and philanthropic and giving more than I took and being kind and just living a clean life, I thought that I was really a good person, right? And I looked at ego as being somebody who was egotistical or somebody who put themselves first, maybe was narcissistic. And I didn't fit that. I didn't think I fit that. And so I really didn't understand what ego identity was. And I just kind of pushed it to the side. And once I realized that ego identity is just you identifying with the physicality that you're in and becoming it and letting that be your driver. And it was just, holy cow, this is what I've done. I've become my ego identity. I've become everything I've identified with in the physical world. And I didn't step back, be the observer, and watch things go down. And when I started doing that and I realized I had a place that I could reside in that was peaceful, that was huge for me. So I'm hoping that you get that huge response like I did in understanding the difference between, again, the inner critic, ego identity on steroids, versus your spirit self and where you begin to reside in your heart. Because it's really important that we are able to come home to who we are, our authentic, beautiful selves. All right, I hope this was helpful. Have fun with your homework, and I'll see you in about a week. Okay, thanks so much. Have a great day.